The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike Big Wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 916. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about volcanoes and coral reefs, petroglyphs and carnival, rum punch, and America's childhood friend. As we go to the West Indies, this is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about the West Indies. I'd like to welcome back to the show Jeff Ohlfs, who's come to talk to us this time about the West Indies. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to be back.
I have to have Jeff on the show periodically just because then it's a show that I'm not going to hear from Jeff about something that we got wrong. So this time it'll only be his fault. Jeff is a former park ranger, and you may remember the first time he was on the show was talking about Joshua Tree National Park, where he was the head ranger, but has retired from that now and done more traveling and has been back on the show talking about some of his travels. Where are we talking about in the West Indies, Jeff?
Chris, we're going to talk about 5 of the Leeward Islands of the Lesser Antilles that are also known as the British, Dutch, and French West Indies. And of course, these are all Caribbean islands. So
Right.
There's plenty of beaches, but I think from the past recordings, most people know I'm not a beach person, but I did visit a few, and I'll mention those out. Specifically, I would say we're going to talk about the dual island of St. Maarten, French, and Sint Maarten, Dutch, Anguilla, British, Saba, Dutch, St. Barthélemy, French, and Sint Eustatius, Dutch.
Excellent. And you were there this year to all 5 of these islands.
Actually, last year, but yes.
Last year, sorry, in 2023.
Yeah, I know. We lose track of time.
And I was to 2 or 3 of those in 2 years before that, I think, during the pandemic, actually. One of the first trips that I did during the pandemic. Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to see as much, but...
Yeah, the pandemic stopped me. I was trying to do an island hop, theoretically, from Dominican Republic all the way down, just going one island to the next. And as you said, the pandemic threw a monkey wrench into that.
And a lot of travel plans. Excellent. First of all, why should someone go to these 5 islands in the Lesser Antilles?
Because it's the Caribbean and I like the island hop.
Why these, though? There are a lot of pretty islands. There's a lot of interesting islands. There's a lot of beautiful islands in the Caribbean.
Some of them are not visited at all. Some of them are overly visited. They're all near each other, so it makes for a nice little grouping. I used St. Maarten as a base. I actually flew in from the British Virgin Islands. St. Maarten is known as the Friendly Island, and you can do daily flights to each of the other islands. Yes, you can take a boat, but you need to look at your time cost to make that happen. I actually made 8 flights in and out of Sint Maarten and my stay there. To get the most of your time out of the various different islands, you really should do the first flight out and the last flight back. Okay. Having said that, though, my first travel tip would be and we'll discuss the airport here in a second, but no, there's no place to eat early in the morning at a 6 a.m. flight at this airport. Most of them don't open until 10 a.m. If you want to have breakfast or something before you hop on, or you can get to the other island and have breakfast, just remember you'll find nothing at the airport as far as food before 10 a.m. But it was interesting, too, when I went, you may recall they had that Sargassum Sea going on with all that brown algae that was devastating all the Atlantic beaches. And it was very evident in my...
Okay. I don't remember hearing about it specifically with these islands, but yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of them, I'll mention one place where they were cleaning it up just by the truckload. Yeah. But the one airline that is prominent there is Win Air. And they fly these de Havilland, Canada Twin Otters. They're a short takeoff and landing airplane for good reason. And I'll explain a couple of those as we go along. I have to say, though, that you climb a ladder in the back of the plane in these Twin Otters, and when I loved the customer service. The pilot was there greeting every passenger as they boarded into the ladder. Obviously, there's no food service because most of the flights are less than an hour. But yeah, really nice airline to fly with. Let's start about with Sint Maarten, Dutch. This is one of the smallest islands on Earth that is actually divided between two countries since 1648. There's no physical borders, and the people move freely back and forth from one side to the other. There's actually 4 main roads, 2 of which actually do have a border monument. It's the only thing that tells you you're crossing an international boundary. When I landed from the British Virgin Islands, of course, I had to go through Dutch customs because I landed on the Dutch side of the island. I picked up a rental car. I did just use it for 2 days, took it back, and I used it just to travel around that particular island. And then I just dropped it off and used Uber to get between the airport and my hotel for the rest of my stays because I was just flying to other islands. So there's no sense in having the rental car. The hotel I stayed at was the Azure Hotel and Art Studio on Simpson Bay Beach. It's very near the airport. It's a little boutique hotel. They have 3 cats and 18 Hurricane Irma rescued yellow and red-footed tortoises. They built a pen in the middle of the hotel courtyard that has all these tortoises that were rescued after Hurricane Irma. The owners are painters, Michael and Faunette Angelides. They're expats. It was right on the beach. It was really nice falling asleep to the sound of surf waves each night and very pleasant. I highly recommend it as a place to stay. Then I started touring Sint Maarten. Most of these islands were sighted by Columbus in 1493 on his second voyage. So he ended up naming most of them. He named this one after Sint Maarten Tours because that was the day he sighted on the feast day of that saint.
I was going to say that's usually the deal.
Usually, but not entirely the case on some of these. The island has 37 beaches. It's basically 12 mile long by 12 miles wide. I drove about 76 miles around it in my rental car. I would caution one hazard of driving. They've got kamikaze motorbike riders passing you on both sides at high rates of speed. You have no idea where they're coming from. So just one caution. The capital on the Dutch side is Philipsburg. Their old 1793 constitutional court is depicted on their flag, and all the old Dutch government office buildings downtown. When I was there, May 1st was Labor Day, which is a holiday in the Caribbean. Nothing was open, which made it for a good day to drive around, actually. This was the Dutch Carnival Day. I caught part of the parade. It is a very long parade. It is a very slow parade. But you do get to watch all the colorful troops dressed out and just dancing by with all the music blaring. It's carnival. And lots of people were lining the parade around, and there was lots of merriment. There is an old fort just above the town called Dutch Fort Amsterdam, built in 1631. It's on a rock promontory. The only way to get to it is through a private resort, which you may or may not drive into depending on the friendliness of the resort guards. Yeah, they would not let me drive in. They were having some event, so I had to walk all the way across. But it's the ruins on an old Dutch fort overlooking the Caribbean. There they got tons of these green iguanas, these huge things that are just hanging out everywhere in the trees and crawling all over everything, and they're all over the place. On the French side, the capital is Margaux, and of course their city hall, they call it the Hôtel des Collectives.
Okay.
Above that town is the French fort called Fort Saint Louis. It overlooks not only the town, but also the harbor, and that was built about 1789. The highest mountain on the island is called Pico Paradise, and if you're brave enough to drive up the road to the top, you get some wonderful views up there over most of the island. And there's also the St. Maarten Nature Reserve, which has some of the beaches that people can relax on and enjoy the Caribbean water. I want to take a second and talk about the Dutch International Airport, which I flew in and out of. Now, there is one on the French side, but I think most everybody knows about the Dutch one, the Princess Juliana International Airport. This is the famous airport where the jets land over your head, the beachgoers sandblasting you.
Right.
It's called Maho or Jet Blast Beach. And yes, that sand does sting. So I spent an afternoon there. There's 2 bars, one at each end. The Driftwood bar, you can sit down, have pizza, drink rum punch, and that'll be a theme throughout this, rum punch. And just watch the planes take off and land. There's a chalkboard at the Sunset Bar, which is on the opposite side of the beach, that lists all the daily flight arrival times.
Oh, okay.
Let me give you a few suggestions for some possible places to eat on the island. Within walking distance of my hotel, there was a Mediterranean restaurant called the Beirut Restaurant, and I love Mediterranean food. I actually ate there for 3 of my nights. Really good. Another hotel just up the beach from my hotel is called Mary Spoon Restaurant, and you can get the Maho filet dinner there, and of course more rum punch. Lots of fish, obviously, throughout the whole area. One of the more unique restaurants was I drove up into the French side to the town of Grand Case, and I had dinner at the Villa Royale. They had a goat curry, which was just wonderful. And then they wanted me to try their guava berry liqueur.
Okay.
It was tasty. Potent, but it was definitely tasty, and they make it themselves. That's it for St. Maarten. I'd like to now do the day trip I did over to Anguilla. You basically ferry over to Anguilla. And there are several different ports, one on the Dutch side, one on the French side. It's about a 7.5 mile or 25-minute ride across to this British dependency. Anguilla is Spanish for eel, and it was, of course, the English colonized it in 1650. The island is a raised coral reef as opposed to a lot of the other islands being more volcanic. It's 16 miles long by about
flat
4 miles wide.
Is the other thing that means.
Yes, there's very little there. Rolling hills, but yeah, it's flat.
Mm-hmm.
Just be aware you're going to have a departure tax going and coming. It was $5 going, $11 coming back, and these are US dollars that I'm using. Again, I rented a car there from June's Car Rental. Spent the day, drove about 29 miles around the island. You will have to pay a $15 driver's license, temporary Anguilla driver's license to drive. And the rental car company does that for you. 2 of the places that I really wanted to see dealt with Native American, Indian sacred sites. They were basically sacred springs that had numerous facial petroglyphs and what they call birthing cupules. The first one was Big Spring. And I noticed that most of these Caribbean or Indian petroglyphs, they look alien. The pictures, they got these big eyes.
Oh no, you're going to start that the conspiracy theories here.
No, it's just I was surprised to see after the number of islands that I've been on that it was their way of, they weren't stick figures or things like that. Yeah. That was their artistic view. Again, for me, one of the more interesting things too is the different reptiles running around. And I'm not talking about snakes, but like ground lizards. I mentioned the green iguanas. This island has a ground lizard, and they're lizards. They are running around everywhere.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, their only national park is called Fountain National Park. And it basically preserves a sinkhole cave. You're not allowed to get into the cave. It's protected. There is a bit of a grate
over the opening. And inside, of course, is more petroglyphs, but they've got this rock image of their Native American god called Jacua, Jocahu. And it's considered the most important archaeological site on the island. And the rangers, while I was there, gave me a tour of those two places. Now, lunch, I have to recommend Scilly Cay. Scilly Cay is an island in Harbor Island.
Okay.
You go to Harbor Island, or Island Harbor, sorry, and you hail their water taxi. It comes over and picks you up from the dock, takes you out to the island for lunch, and returns you after lunch for a fee, of course. But their grilled crayfish with dragon fruit, and of course, their own version of the potent rum punch. It was a great meal. I was there for a while. They've got a sandy beach there that you can relax on. That's all the island is, basically this restaurant in the middle of a harbor. There was one other, I did not get over to it, didn't have time. It's called the Dune Preserve Bar. And again, I know I'm harping on rum punch, but they've got a Dune Shine that I hear is really potent. Other than that, there's lots of resorts, and I'm not going to mention it on all the islands, but you've got all the week-long resorts you want to stay at that you could possibly want. It's a beautiful little island, but I was just there for the day, so took the ferry back to St. Maarten.
And so this one you did not fly. This is very close.
Did not. It's very close, yeah. All the rest of them I flew into.
Yeah. I'm seeing that the distance from the northern tip of St. Maarten Island to the southern tip is less than the distance across to Anguilla.
Yeah. And like I said, my ferry came out of Margot, the French port. So the next island I went to was Saba. And although it's spelled S-A-B-A, it's pronounced Saba.
Okay.
It's Dutch. It's another one of Columbus's second voyage sightings. And he originally, from what I read, named it St. Christopher.
Oh, okay.
Whether it was after himself, I do not know. The island is 5 square miles. It's the smallest inhabited island in the Caribbean.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And I love this island. Absolutely love this island. The airport is the shortest commercial runway in the world, which is why you have these short takeoff and landing airplanes. You literally fly in over the edge of a sea cliff, landing on the short runway, and of course then you take off over the opposite sea cliff edge. What was interesting is they've got a huge solar field right next to the airport, and it's where about 40% of their renewable energy comes from.
Interesting.
This island only has one road called The Road. The road was built by human power, not by bulldozer. And it was said that it was the road that couldn't be built. It's 6 miles long with no traffic lights.
Okay.
On this island, I decided not to rent, but I hired the Triple T taxi service for the day. A really nice driver drove me all the way down from the top to the bottom and the various different stops that I made. So we did about 15 miles around the area. Like I said, it's not a big island. When I landed, the first thing I did was most of the main part of the island is called Mount Scenery National Park. Mount Scenery happens to be the highest peak in the Netherlands. And they filmed King Kong there for part of it. But
the more recent one.
Yeah, I'm guessing it would be the more recent one. Yeah, I never actually...
Not the original one, I think.
Yeah. I took off and did a hike to the very northern shore of the island on what's called Sulphur Mine Trail. It takes you out to the mining ruins of sulfur mines.
Okay.
I would caution people here, you would probably want some insect repellent. I got nasty bit by insects there. And this part of the island is very dry and very desert-like.
Okay.
And again...
And you haven't said it, but it was implied by several things you've said. This is a volcanic island with obviously the tall peak here was the clue.
It was one of them. Yes.
Yes.
There was more, as I'll explain here in a second, on one of the other ones, which confirms your suspicions. Again, if you're in the reptiles, the anoles and the black iguanas are
they're pretty prominent. That's most of the wildlife you're going to see on some of these islands besides birds. This island has no beaches. And then there's one minor exception to that, and that's adjacent to this airport. And I didn't even know about this place until the very end, and I wish I'd brought my bathing suit. Is right next to the airport is called Flat Point Tide Pool. It's basically a small swimming hole, very pleasant. It's rock lined by volcanic. The waves are coming in, but it's like a little pool that's made into this volcanic rock, and you're separated by a little rock volcanic ridge from the actual bay. Really nice. It's a small little park, and you can dive in there. Or I wouldn't not dive, but get in. And I wish I'd brought my swimming suit. And nothing I ever read talked about this place, so it was a real surprise to see it. Heading down to the south end, you're going to go through one of the few villages that they have on the island. This was called the Windward Side. That's the name of the village, the Windward Side. It's been described as a Lilliputian-like village. It's got all these little red
Lilliputian
on it. Lilliputian. Okay, there you go. Got me correcting. Really quaint little village, walk around, little restaurant, cafes and things. They're known in this village. The women have a lace making industry there.
Okay.
Bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore. And this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call semi-heure. Parfait. 7:00. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
And some of the nicest lace I've ever seen. I obviously picked up several souvenirs and brought them back home. But you want to stop off there and definitely get some souvenirs of people on lace-made items. And there's a whole history. This island has what we call waysides, and those are those little interpretive panels that you see, particularly in national parks and things like that.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the village. There's one panel on the road. There's one panel on the lace making. And this town or village also has the only commercial farm known as the farm.
We should say the population of this is like a little over 1,000 people on the whole island. So it's one of the reasons you don't need a great variety of vocabulary here in terms of describing villages.
And not a lot of people go here. They just don't. And it's a great little island. Of course, being volcanic with the mountains and stuff, they call their valleys and canyons guts, G-U-Ts. Sure, it's a Dutch version of something. But the capital is called the Bottom, which lies in the bottom of an extinct volcano.
Dormant is what I'm reading.
Okay. Maybe it's, who knows? We'll know the next eruption. And again, you're dropping down into this, and you just see this cute little capital down on the bottom of this thing. My driver wanted me to stop off, and I was glad he did, at the Sacred Heart Catholic Church. If you go inside, there is a brightly colored mural on the ceiling above the altar, which the locals call the Sistine Chapel of Saba. It is, it's gorgeous. It really is a beautiful painting on the ceiling there. So there's a little restaurant there called Island Flavor. Again, fish, mahi, filet for lunch. They also on this island make their own homemade sweet rum called Saba Spice.
Okay.
And I don't want to call it bathtub gin, but everybody makes their own.
Okay.
So You can go to different restaurants and they're going to have made it themselves. You can certainly buy it. I noticed that a couple of the few gift shops they have, like back up in Windward side, each one of them has their own variety. Again, it's a local drink worth trying. And then again, not a very large island, but the next stop is the bottom of the island at the end of the road. But this is actually called Fort Bay. And there's plenty of places the driver is very gracious about pulling off and taking scenic photographs of the whole island. It's green, except for that north end, which is desert-like. It's just a gorgeous island and not large. So again, and the one interesting thing flying back to St. Maarten, there's no security at the airport. You just walk onto the plane.
Are there flights from Saba other than to St. Maarten?
No, I don't believe there are.
Okay.
I obviously didn't look into it. I'm just thinking here, since Saba is Dutch, and I was flying in and out of the major regional airport on the Dutch St. Maarten, I bet you all the flights go into St. Maarten and you hop over to Saba. Matter of fact, I think I remember the ranger I was talking to mentions that when he goes back home.
Excellent.
Okay, ready for the next island then?
Yes.
Next one is St. Barthélemy, French, or as everybody knows it as St. Bart's.
And this one does get some tourism.
It's probably the most expensive island I was at. It's definitely lifestyles of the rich and famous. I felt like I was part of that because I was the only passenger on the flight into St. Bart's, and I was the only passenger on the flight out of St. Bart's. So I had the whole plane to myself. So I felt like I was experiencing a little bit of that. This is another unique Caribbean airport where you come in over a saddle, which has a roundabout, roadway roundabout on top of the saddle. You go right over the top of that, and then you plunge down to the runway. The plane does a nosedive down to the runway. Again, Christopher Columbus sighted this on his second voyage, but he named this one after his brother.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
At least that's what I read. Again, picked up a rental. This was a bit of a more unique rental. I got it from the Cool Car Rental. They're one of the few that actually rent a Moki. This is what a lightweight, doorless English recreational vehicle.
Okay.
And that's why I rented it. I heard you could rent these. It's a bit of a challenge to drive. It definitely requires a lot of concentration and, of course, manual shifting. But I got about 34 miles around the island driving this thing. It was fun. It just was a unique car. I thought I would experience something different. The island is 11 miles by about 3 miles. And this is where I went to one of the few beaches I actually spent some time on. Before it got too hot during the daytime, did a morning drive out to the coast and the beach of Saline, Saline, which is part of the St. Barthélemy Natural Reserve. Beautiful beach, not heavily crowded when I was there, although they had these huge tractor machines getting the sargassum off the beach, and just dump trucks were hauling this stuff away. I think the Caribbean got decimated that summer. In the afternoon, I went to the capital, which is Gustavia. It's a U-shaped harbor. It's got a lot of historic buildings, 3 forts guarding the harbor. One belongs to the gendarmes, which is, of course, their police, called Fort Oscar. The other, their National Park Service has their office at and has a lighthouse called Fort Gustav. And then the third is Fort Carl, which is pretty much literally nothing but a few ruins that you can see on the ground above a very nice beach called Shell Beach, which would be a nice place to spend an afternoon at. Only the gendarme, the Fort Oscar, you will not be able to get into because that's the police headquarters. I have to say I did find St. Bart's to be a bit disappointing. The people were just not as friendly as they were on other islands. And except for some restaurants, basically everything closes at noon for several hours, including the police station. So just be aware. I don't want to call it a siesta time, but I think everybody knows what I mean, which I felt unusual for a Caribbean island. But be aware that does happen. If you go down into town there, I would don't try to find a parking space in downtown Gustavia because you're not. So if you want to save yourself some time, just find something on the outer edges and do the walk in. It's just the parking, it's just difficult to find a parking space there. And you'll spend a lot of time running around and save yourself a little bit on that. It's a lot of residences on this island. Like I said, it's pretty popular for the rich and famous. Everybody has a getaway there. So there wasn't much else unless you stay on the beach the whole day. That was pretty much it for St. Bart's.
It's funny. I was trying to remember St. Bart's because I was looking at a post I had written about our cruise out of St. Maarten, and I knew that St. Bart's was on the itinerary, but I forgot that it had closed. Again, having done a cruise in 2021. And so we were having islands opening and closing rather suddenly. And so I didn't see St. Bart's, which is why I don't remember it.
Yeah. So I flew then back to, again, St. Maarten.
Yep.
And then I did my last flight. And this was to Sint Eustatius, or as the Dutch call it, Statia. You land at the FDR International Airport, and it's named after FDR because FDR has his Dutch relatives living on the island.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. And the name Eustatius, depending on who you talk to or what you read, I should say, it derives from either an imitation of the sound of the Indian word for the island, or it was recorded in 1595 by Sir Francis Drake. Said that they were off Astasia, although also Columbus cited it, and of course he named it St. Eustace. So take your pick. There was little else mentioned until the French got there and built the first small fort in 1629, and then the Dutch came in after them in 1636 and built on top of the French fort, and it's now called Fort Orange, Oranje. This island, they like to tell you, has changed hands 22 times.
Oh my, okay.
It's also called the Golden Rock because it was a free port where imported and exported goods made the local merchants very rich. We've all heard that New York's Manhattan Island was bought by the Dutch with 30 glass beads.
Right.
Well, the Dutch glass blue beads, as well as the Statia version of the blue beads, were a form of local currency. And if you look hard enough, you can still find them on the beaches.
Huh.
It's the first foreign port in the world after the American independence to salute the American flag.
Right.
The brigantine Andrew Doria in November of 1776 received it, and so the island received the title of America's childhood friend.
I had heard, I knew the salute, and it was a place we actually bought arms and ammunition for the revolution, but I had not heard America's childhood friend. I like that.
Yeah, that's true. They call it the Armory of the American Revolution, as you stated. There's a lot of history there. Again, we're talking a really small island, 5 miles by 3 miles. They say if you step on Statia, prepare to set your watches back 20 years. It's a cute little place there, too. I also picked up a rental car, drove about 40 miles around this island. I do have to say, though, they are the worst roads in the Caribbean. I felt like I was home in the desert with dirt roads, potholed, crumbling asphalt roads. It was fun to drive.
Huh.
But the residents are some of the friendliest and most helpful people I met in my entire trip. The island's only town is Oranjestad. The upper town has the old Dutch buildings and Fort Orange, including its open-air museum. Lots of old historic buildings there, a walkable area, but a lot of them are in badly need of repair.
Okay.
Where the wharfs and the warehouses and the ruins of those functions are, there is not the road that you drive down, but there is a protected historic road that goes between the upper and the lower town that is called the Slave Path due to the island's slave history. The day I was there, it happened to be World Firefighter Day. So I got to see the parade of fire vehicles. And again, we're talking a very small town, going in and out of the town, up and down the different streets, wiggling its way and going from upper town down to lower town with all their lights and sirens going. The island has 3 national parks, Quill, Boven, and Signal Hill. These are the peaks that are on the flag of this island nation. Stanapa, which is the St. Eustatius National Parks, manages these islands' protected areas. All of the shoreline is part of St. Eustatius National Marine Park. The one main volcanic mountain, Quill, which is the most prominent, you can purchase a $10 daily park pass. And again, being a dormant volcano crater, you can hike up and into it. I hiked up and to the top, and lots of, you're talking about tropical desert vegetation. Again, lots of iguanas different that are unique to this island, lizards and things like that. A beautiful volcanic park to walk in. A few beaches. There's one up by Boven that you can, if you want a beach afternoon at. I stayed at the Papaya Inn, which is a little boutique inn. It's really nice, very clean, very comfortable, great folks. Highly recommend it. I ended up leaving Statia by ferry. I continued my island hopping down to St. Kitts and Nevis on the Marana ferry. There was a 30-mile sail through some very choppy seas, but you leave out of the lower town there on, believe it or not, on Gallows Bay. And yes, that's named for the hangings that were there, done back in history. So that was my last island, and that was my stay on Statia.
Excellent.
I'll add a couple concluding remarks.
Yeah.
Be potential short-range showers every day. Just be aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm also surprised at how almost every one of these islands, except for maybe Saba, Saba did have a medical university.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, that's our medical university. Oh, okay. And then just as far as meals are concerned, I would say the lower expensive, most of them, any one of your meals is going to run between $30 and $40 a person.
Oh, wow.
On that. Yeah. Keep that in mind as you're planning.
And that's as true at Saba as it is at St. Bart's.
Yeah, because you got to remember, they only have the farm, and everything coming in has got to come in. Yeah, you would think they would be a little cheaper, but they're not necessarily, because they're a Caribbean island that has to import everything.
Right. Well, I would think that like fish might be cheaper. Is obviously
true.
Getting something that is obviously imported, like chicken or cow, that's got to come in on a boat probably, or a plane, even more expensive. Interesting. Why that set of islands for your trip?
As I mentioned, my intent was to, excluding Cuba, start the Dominican Republic and just island hop. And Puerto Rico, excluding that. Starting in Dominican and just island hop all the way down to South America. And COVID caught part of the trip in two. And so then I had to extend this a little bit. And I still plan to continue on. I'm down now to Guadalupe, so I just need to go Guadalupe south.
Okay. Got it. So you're doing it, as we'd say, if you were doing the Appalachian Trail, you're not a through hiker here. You're station hiker.
I'd hope to be, but unfortunately hiker, COVID, the pandemic, a through islander.
Through islander. There you go. We'll come up with a terminology for this yet. Before we get to some of our wrap-up questions, what would you tell people who are following in your footsteps? What do you need to know?
Just, as with any trip, obviously, pre-plan everything. They are Caribbean islands, so beware of hurricane season.
Right.
They are tourist destinations. Try to maybe, for a little cheaper, go in a bit of off-season. I went in, I think it was maybe April. Yeah, because I got there May 1st. And they're not very big. So unless you're planning to go to one of the islands and stay on the resort for a week, which is not something I generally enjoy, then there's a few things on it, and it's enough for a day on each island.
When you were talking about St. Maarten, I actually also stayed in St. Maarten before my cruise. I stayed out at the Oyster Bay Beach Resort, which was lovely. I was only there for a short period of time because we were getting on a boat and didn't really have a lot of time to see either Sint Maarten or St. Maarten. Let's get to our wrap-up questions. You're standing in the prettiest spot. in any one of these islands? Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
I would have to say Saba, Mount Scenery, the green volcanic. If King Kong liked it, I'm not going to argue.
No, certainly not with him. That'd be a bad idea. And one thing that makes you laugh, and say only in the Lesser Antilles.
International borders.
Oh.
So to get to Anguilla,
yep,
I left the Netherlands, drove to a French port, and landed in the United Kingdom. 3 countries in 1 hour, and then on the flip side, going to Saba from Sint Maarten, I never left the Netherlands, but had to go through immigration both ways.
And when you talk about the flights that you took, what's the longest duration of any of these flights? We're not talking about a long distance.
Oh, most of them were less than an hour. 30 minutes, maybe some of them. An hour at the max. Maybe going from Sint Maarten down to Statia might have been a little bit, because that's the furthest one south before you get to St. Kitts. It might have been a little longer than an hour.
Got it. Okay. Cool. If you want to summarize the Lesser Antilles in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Beaches.
Yep.
Colonial. And I'm just going to use the word Caribbean.
Okay. And what do you mean by Caribbean?
Just the
Clearly
whole
rum.
Islands. Yeah, rum too. Yeah, definitely rum. Yo-ho.
Part of that.
Islands in the middle of the ocean with just the whole Caribbean vibe, having been there for their Carnival Day. It's like you're in the Caribbean.
Now, I'm curious, the Carnival Day, you were in Carnival on Anguilla? Am I remembering?
No, that was Dutch Sint Maarten.
Dutch Sint Maarten. What was that day? So is that their Independence Day? It's not, for instance, Carnival associated with Lent. So in the Caribbean, it tends to be associated with the abolishment of slavery or independence or something like that. Do you know, in the case of Sint Maarten?
This was May 1st, which is May Day.
Okay, May Day.
So it was, May Day, Labor Day. For that aspect of that, for those that celebrate the May Day connection to labor. So that was when they had their carnival.
Okay. Interesting. Because I do know that Carnival is different around the Caribbean, and a lot of times it's associated with slavery.
And then depending on whether or not how Catholic the island is, it's associated with Lent too. Yeah, Carnival is a Caribbean thing as much as it is from New Orleans south or Mobile south to Rio de Janeiro.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming back on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for the Caribbean, and especially for these 5 islands. Am I counting correctly?
I believe it was 5. Yeah, it was definitely 5 islands. Yep. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's always fun.
Thanks, as always, to the patrons of the show, as well as the advertisers who help support Amateur Traveler financially, since this is now my full-time job. If you're interested in learning more about becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I'm planning on heading down to LA for a Billy Joel concert next weekend, as well as seeing my 6-month-old grandson. But then I'm off to Cartagena, Colombia. I am not currently planning on missing any weeks of the show at this point. I probably will in November when I'm in Istanbul and in the Balkans. But you never know, because things can get complicated when you throw in travel into your regular schedule. I'm looking for more pitches for the show. If you've been someplace that you think would make a great episode, please do let me know. Send an email to chris2x@gmail.com. And that also includes ideas for bonus episodes of the show that are more topical. I'm probably going to take those more from listeners of the show or from people that I know than from random pitches from people on the internet. A couple new posts on the website, including downtown San Francisco's most haunted places and best San Francisco food tours for foodies. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more